Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Today, my guest is Brent Weedman. He is a Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a judo black belt, a retired mixed martial artist, and also one of the head instructors over here at CORE in Louisville, Kentucky. I've got some great information kind of talking to him about his martial arts journey, stuff he's dealt with as a mixed martial artist and just a Jiu-Jitsu player, and the injuries and everything he's gone through. So I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Stick around. All right, I am joined today by Brent Weedman. Super excited to talk to him. I can't even see his face right now. That's okay. I like to make eye contact.
Prolonged eye contact.
Yeah, Brent's a guy that I've trained with throughout the years. Got a ton of knowledge, ton of experience in all the martial arts, grappling arts, and all that kind of stuff. So without further ado, here he is.
Hey, thanks, Eugene.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. Actually, we were just kind of talking. You're competing a little bit more as of late.
I've been trying to.
Is there anything, like any kind of motivation behind just starting to get out there a little more?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. The big question I get from retirement from MMA is, every bro that comes across my path, oh, man, do you miss it? Yeah, actually, just every waking moment of every day, as a matter of fact. So there's a big part of, jiu-jitsu competition scratches that itch. The other thing is that, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, with like my martial arts journey, but there was a switch in my head and in my heart, at a certain point where I became a jiu-jitsu fighter, jiu-jitsu primarily, and jiu-jitsu started taking over my brain. My wife and all my close friends can really attest to this, and so being a good, it became about being a good submission grappler in MMA, and then when I retired, my goal then became not so much any particular title or any particular victory, but I want to be a respectable submission grappler in my own right, just as a submission grappler. So the best compliment I get is when I grapple with guys that are just grapplers, and they go, "Oh, you're pretty good for an MMA guy." Like I love that.
I think that seeing you at that tournament, we had a tournament at the gym, local one in Louisville, AGC, I think, and there was a little background story on that where we kind of knew, I guess, you'd gone against that guy in the past. I don't know what the guy's name was. And
BJ Nelson.
Yeah, you guys had a
vicious match.
Fucking battle.
Yeah.
And back and forth. And
it was like 30, 35 minutes?
I don't know, man. I got tired watching you guys. It was amazing, though. It was really, I think, a lot of heart. And I think that, I remember watching some of your fights, when you were still fighting for Bellator, and I was like, Brent just keeps walking forward. Like, he doesn't, it's like the damn Terminator kind of. I don't know, man. It's just.
Yeah, it was my downfall. It's a blessing and a curse.
Why do you say that?
Well, because. And explaining this is always a double-edged sword, because when I try and explain this to people, I always run the risk of like, oh, he's saying this shit to try and sound tough or to try and sound cool, and like I don't care about being tough, and I don't care about being cool. I'm way too old for that nonsense. But there is what I've sort of colloquially called my caveman gene, caveman in my head. And I would develop, it was a big reason why my old trainer and I would butt heads all the time. And he really did not like me very much, because we'd spend, and I have to say I understand where he's coming from, because he would spend months and months developing this really complex striking, striking game plan with lots of finesse and lots of, we're going to sucker him into this, and we're going to do this, and here's game plans A, B, and C. And then I'd get a little blood in the water, and I'd either get a shot, or the worst thing that could ever happen to me, you can look back through my career, it happened to me 3 or 4 times, is I would drop a guy, real early in the first round, and then my eyes would just roll back in my head, and I would just turn into, you said the Terminator. I discovered about 2/3 of the way through my career that I had a pretty good chin, and that was a really bad thing to discover, because I joke with my wife all the time that an embarrassingly large percentage of what I do in my life is motivated by this hypothetical person in the back of my head calling me a pussy. like, oh, you coward. Like, I'm no coward, and there's nobody calling me that. I'm just,
Well, it's I guess you're self-motivated. I don't know, man. Yeah, I've seen you walk through some shit.
Yeah, and that was just kind of to show that I could, really, which is dumb. And you lose fights that way. Like, nobody wins fights for being tough. Like, I took more shots than you, and you didn't drop me. That was stupid.
You're fun to watch, though, man.
Well,
I'll tell you. I think the first time that I met you was probably at Highlander. I was a white belt.
Yeah, with Joe Hike.
Joe Hike, I trained with Joe Hike, Brian Holmes.
Sure.
Obviously, Mike Yanez was there. You just stopped by every now and again, and I remember seeing you. I remember looking at your ears, because they were still messed up back then. I was like, that guy looks really intimidating. And I remember I was like getting ready for a tournament, something small like an ego or something like that, and I was like, I didn't know what rank you were, and I was like, fuck, I hope he's not in my division, because he looks like a little scary to me. But yeah, I mean, you've been around the game forever. I mean, like, I think you're probably like, I like to think, I talked to Chewy about this too, with him starting up early and you as well. You guys are kind of like pioneers of martial arts, like mixed martial arts in Louisville, really. I mean, I really can't remember you guys and the Ferguson brothers, and I really can't remember a ton more, I mean, really respected
Ferguson
people that
brothers were around
that made, made some waves, really. I mean,
Well, we talk a lot about I was lucky in that I had a dad that was a martial arts geek, and so I literally grew up in this. And I'm not using literally like a sorority girl. I do mean literally. I don't remember starting the martial arts, and I started doing judo when I was like 7 or 8.
Yeah,
right around then, and my father and I did this full contact style of karate. Akin to Kyokushin, if anybody knows what that is, and not many people do in the United States. But karate has like 2 realms. They have the traditional side, what we consider like strip mall karate chops and flying kicks, and then they have like a more full contact side, like Kyokushin or Seido Kaiken or Enshin. And my style was called Byakuren. And so my dad and I had this gym. And then my dad was the police recruit coordinator. He was like the drill instructor for cops until I was in middle school or so, before he got put back on the street. And his specialties were firearms and defensive tactics, which is cop speak for fighting. And so we just fought all the time. And he met this guy, again, when I was 7 or 8. He had this recruit come through who was a black belt in judo, named Adam Houghton, who is like one of the biggest influences of my life, much less my martial arts career. What's interesting about him is just last year he self-discovered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He got involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu just like last year in Arizona, where he lives now. But Dad and I had this actual conversation, which in retrospect sounds really stupid, because we were like, hey, I got this really great idea. Let's punch and kick each other, and then we can throw each other. And then once we're on the ground, we can also punch each other while we're doing judo. And we thought we were geniuses. And this was probably, I don't know, so this was like, I was 8, so this was 92. Yeah. What happened in 1993?
93, UFC.
UFC happened, and we were like, oh, this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, so you started in that Kyokushin type, how did you progress? How did your...
So I did that a lot. It took me a long time, like 25 years, to acknowledge that I've always sort of been a grappler by heart.
Okay.
Because I remember distinctly being 8 years old, 9 years old, and the big thing was there's no real full contact karate tournaments in the U.S.
Okay.
In Europe, it's still pretty big. In Japan, obviously, it's huge. I fought a couple times in Japan. I fought once in Europe, in France. It's relatively big in Brazil, ironically, but and a little bit in South America, but it's not very big in the United States. And so, when I discovered judo, there was tournaments to be had, and I remember I would go to karate class with my dad, and do we would have a couple classes. We have a kids class and an adult class. And I would do the kids class and then jump in the car with my mom and drive down to my judo club, which at the time was held. It was Earl Cheatham, who's a local legend of martial arts, 6th degree black belt in judo. He's he actually came back around and ended up being the guy that gave me my black belt in judo last year. It was cool. But he was running a club, a pretty large club called Wakaishu, in the lobby of Bellarmine's sports, like their basketball arena. In that lobby, in Knights Hall, we would set up this huge mat, or at least in my mind it was huge. And so we would jump in the car and drive all the way down there off of Newburgh or whatever, and and do judo a couple nights a week. And there was just, there was more kids my age. Grappling always sort of appealed to me because there was you could just go full bore all the time and not hurt each other.
Right, yeah. You can really...
And there was tournaments, and we would drive all over the Midwest and compete a lot.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that a lot. Did a lot of competing, probably until about 12 or 13. And judo made some big changes. Like, you're a grappling nerd, so you may be privy to some of this, but like in that area, I'd say, golly, I'm trying to do some math in my head. So we're talking like 98, 99, somewhere in the late 90s, judo started making these changes where there was less newaza, less grappling on the ground, more emphasis on stand-up.
Right.
And I was not a stand-up guy. I was a grappler.
And I've always I've watched some judo, like, how long, do they give them like a time limit on the ground? I mean, is there, because I know some judo people are arm bars or whatever, But
in judo, you really got. It depends.
You basically
a lot
go
on the
after
ref.
it, and then
you got to go after it.
Okay.
I would really advise whoever is listening to this to see judo the way I was taught it. To look up. I'll name drop my all-time favorite world champion is a guy named Kashiwazaki, and Kashiwazaki was a ground fighter.
Okay.
He was like a straight guard puller, and he had this move that if you think about, the sumigaishi that's now illegal in IBJJF, where, like, imagine somebody picks up a single leg with their head on the outside.
Yeah.
You know how now you're not allowed to grab the belt and throw them over backwards?
I know that.
Well, yeah, well, that's because you could spike their head into the ground.
Gotcha.
Well, that position was his move. He would, like, put himself in that position, and even on the ground, basically what we would call half guard, or, like, a long step from half guard, and he would flip dudes over and attack the arm. He would attack. He would guard pass, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes for the people.
Yeah,
and
it's good.
He would pin, because in judo you could pin.
Right.
And even when I was a kid, an ippon, a win by pin in judo was 30 seconds. Well, now in the Olympics it's 20. Everything's gotten shorter on the ground side. But basically the rule now is if you're going to choke or you're going to armbar, you got to get it now.
Okay.
And the bad habit that I got from judo is judo guys will belly down and they'll cover their ears with their gi and flatten out, because after a few seconds you just stall out, they restart you. So, but yeah, I stopped competing really around like 13. I think I did a competition at 13, and then when I was 18, I hooked back up with a gym in town called Toshi, which was a storied gym here in Louisville, one of the oldest judo gyms here in Louisville, and Japanese jiu-jitsu. And I trained with them for a while. I got my brown belt through them, and I competed once in the 2004 state championships, I think, and that was my last judo tournament.
So what? Bridge the gap from that to jiu-jitsu. What?
Well, that's an easy gap to bridge. Helio Soneka moved to Louisville. I still do train out of Core Combat Sports. I was training with my then kickboxing coach, Eric Haycraft, and had some MMA fights. I think I had turned pro at that point, because I turned pro on accident. Turns out if somebody offers you money and you say yes, congratulations, you're a professional
So
fighter.
did you have any amateur fights?
I did. I had 5, I believe. And then I had a handful that aren't, that I have on tape that aren't on the internet.
What? So you had MMA fights before you actually started training jiu-jitsu?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. In fact, when I met Soneka, I'm really fond of telling this story, by the way.
Let's hear it.
So Soneka, we were in the lobby of the old court of the gym where we were before we are now, and Soneka, I was meeting him, maybe for the first time. I'm a little hazy on. But we were just in street clothes, and I was wearing, and this is important for the end of the story, I was wearing boxer shorts and like basketball shorts, like jersey shorts. And Soneka says, "Oh, nice to meet you, my friend, classic Brazilian." He said, "Oh, you're MMA fighter, Vale Tudo, that's great. How you lose your last fight?" And I thought, and Soneka, we always joke, is like sort of a savant genius when it comes to jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And because he's crazy. I love you, Soneka, but he's crazy. But he's a genius about jiu-jitsu. And I was like, man, that's really weird. How did you lose your last fight? Well, I lost by triangle. I've only been finished. A doctor stopped the fight once because of a cut, but I've only been finished once my whole career.
Okay.
First time I fought Dan Hornbuckle, he triangle choked me.
Gotcha.
So I told him, I got triangle choke. Oh, my friend, let me show you. Come here. And he kicked his flip-flops off because he lives in flip-flops. And we stepped onto the mat. And he said, and it was a progression that I remember. To this day, I've never been triangled in competition because of this series. And he said, okay, so the first one was like my arm was inside, one arm in, one arm out. But their ankles were crossed. They weren't quite locked, right? And he taught me how to, a very technical way to like both arms in or both arms out to escape the triangle. Great. He said, okay, so the next time they're starting to lock it up and it's getting pretty tight. So he shows me and like, okay, they're locked up here, and he grabs the knee, pulls, and blah 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 blah. Awesome. He's like, now this one, he gets real serious. This is like you're about to tap. I want you to put me in a triangle and make me tap. So I slapped a triangle on him, I'm pulling, and he jammed his thumb in my ass. Like, all the way in my ass. And I was like, whoa! And, like, let go. And he's like, you do this, my friend, and let go immediately. And I was thinking, like, man, I'm not... You're going to get a reputation. Like, I'm not going to be the guy that, like, jams my thumb in somebody. But that was my first lesson ever with Soneca was, check their oil to get them to let go of a... But this was, like, you got to remember...
Did it work? Did you ever use it?
Never. I've never used it.
All right.
I've used the first two, but never the last. But you got to think about where he came from, and that's what I'm so lucky to have, like, an instructor like that. That to him, I mean, the old Vale Tudo fights, I mean, you can find them on the internet, man. There was none of these, like, rules. Forget about knee reaping and all the other rules in Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
Like, even the rules in MMA didn't really exist. Headbutts, groin attacks, checking the oil, all that stuff. It was a fight. So,
you can do whatever the hell you can to get out.
Whatever you can. So, yeah. So I started doing Jiu-Jitsu. Soneca gave me a blue belt on my first class. That was late 2006 or
so you already
2007.
had some background in like some. I mean, you did judo, so you had a little bit of grappling.
Yeah, I was a brown belt, and then when I was 18, I discovered Louisville MMA. The local guys may know is like a local MMA team.
Right.
Louisville MMA started as a sort of open gym. At the Beachmont Community Center in the Highlands, off of like by the Douglas Loop.
Yeah.
And Gavin Worth, who now lives in Florida, I believe, was really influential in my career. A super nice guy. Didn't have a tremendous amount of success the few times he competed, but one of those just like fight nerds. I mean, he knew everything, and he had tapes of everything, and he was just an encyclopedia of moves. Awesome. He didn't look like it, but he was just really, really bright. And he would run. It was basically like a pickup game of basketball, only instead of basketball, it was martial arts. And it was great because that's where I met Chewy. The first few times I rolled with Chewy, he came out there. That's the only time I ever rolled with Mike Yanez, contrary to what he has told people. I rolled with him exactly once, and he came out and challenged me at that open mat. We had a lot of good times there, but we got like ninjutsu guys, like guys that legitimately thought they were ninjas, and we got guys that thought they were sword fighters and boxers and kickboxers. It was fun. It was a good time.
I mean, you had a first fight, like, so you just basically had judo, had some karate, and then what made you decide to fight? Because I tell people all the time, you got to be, I've never been to cage fight. I never have. I've done, jiu-jitsu it's been like 8 years, but I think you got to have like a switch. You know what I mean? You have to know that you have to be kind of crazy in a way to say, like, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to get punched in the face.
Sure.
And I mean, you got to have a certain. It's got to have a certain level of just
crazy. I mean, I'll accept that.
I don't know. It's just a way to like.
There's a kind of bloodlust, and I think
it's primal. It's primal.
Yeah, it's very primal. It's very, very primal. And you'll never hear me say that I'm the best fighter. You'll never hear me say that I'm some like excellent tactician.
Sure.
But again, going back to the caveman gene, I love that feeling of like I signed the paperwork and you signed the paperwork, so I get to go as hard as I want, and nobody's going to call me a dick. Right. Nobody's going to be like, what a jerk. He went so... Like, no, that's a fight. Right. And then, by the way, most of those fights, like, me and that guy went and got beers afterwards.
Right, and that's awesome.
That was why... People were always so shocked. Oh, you could fight your friends?
Sure.
I'd fight my mom. I don't care. Like, it's just... Not my mom.
That's a little extreme.
She'd whoop my ass. But I'm just saying, like, it was all on the table. There was no subtext. I hate street fights, quote unquote. I use that in heavy air quotes because that word drives me nuts.
Right.
But, like, because 90% of street fights are, one guy with a small dick trying to convince another guy with a small dick that his dick is moderately bigger, you know. And think back of all the fights, like the true fights that you've seen. And contrary to a lot of like the reality fighting sort of scene, which I like and don't have any problems with, but you talk to a lot of these guys and they're training. It seems like sometimes they're training for like the van to pull up next to them, like they're walking down the street with their wife, and then like a van full of ninjas with ski masks pop out. Like that's not most fights. Most fights are like a drunk uncle at a Thanksgiving party, or like some asshole with a tap out shirt at a bar, and like those fights are just not interesting to me.
What do you think? Like, how were your emotions, feelings? Like, how are you mentally? You're going in the cage. You're going to fight. What did you feel? Were you? I mean.
My first, I don't know. When you count the ones that aren't on my record and didn't make it to the light of day, I've probably had about 40 MMA fights.
Okay.
I probably don't remember most of the first 15 or 20. It was really a frustrating thing for me. It was like the biggest challenge of my career was I would do all this training, all this game planning, all this work, all these mitts, all this sparring, and then I'd step in the cage and just black out. And I mean literally blackout.
Really?
You know, I remember it just be a total instinct. I have little flashes of memory of, you know, my first dozen or so fights. And
were you like pretty nervous, or did you just
of course,
like ready to go?
Of course. Yeah, not nervous, scared to death.
Okay.
You know, that's a thing that, you know, you talk to a fighter who says he's not scared, he's lying to you. He's lying through his eye. You know, he's lying to you. I remember I was real lucky. I got to train quite a bit with George Georgel and Rich Franklin.
Okay.
And when I first started training with them, I was training up there like 3, sometimes 4 times a week.
Up in Cincinnati, right?
Up in Cincinnati. Okay. This is before Seneca moved here.
Okay.
And Rich was training for his title defense against David Loazo. In fact, I remember being real stoked because I was on the front page of ShareDog getting triangle choked once by Rich, and I was like, "Oh, that's me." But yeah, I got to train with them a lot, and I remember just sitting around. It'd be like a couple pros and myself, and Rich was talking about, and he has since said this like in public, so I'm not airing anything here. But the example he used was, man, he's like, I have this thought every time I'm in that back room before I walk out, that I just kind of wish that like the electricity would go out and they'd cancel the fight and have to push it back. And I was like, holy shit, this is a UFC champion, like one of the first superstars, one of the first private jet fighters of the UFC. Right. So yeah, I'd just be scared to death, and it would turn into a fight, and eventually I would enjoy it, but I couldn't control myself, and I don't mean like lose control. I mean, I would just go on autopilot, and whatever would happen would happen.
Would it take like getting hit or hitting somebody to get comfortable to like kind of find your groove? Do you think?
No, I was terrified for a long time of getting hit.
You're good at it.
Well, I figured that out eventually, but it's funny looking back. If I could go back and start over, I just like wade through all those punches.
I remember the. Who'd you fight, Zaromskis? And he like threw an illegal knee or some shit.
2 illegal knees. That
and like, I mean, you were down, I think, and he hit you in the head.
Yeah, he kneed me in the head twice.
Holy shit! And that guy.
I don't remember that round. I don't remember. I came to about 30 minutes later.
The thing is that like in his earlier fights, he used a head kick, knocking everybody out. I mean, I was like, holy shit! I remember watching that fight, and I was like, oh damn. I mean, I was like, I didn't know if you. I was like, I don't know if you're gonna get up from that shit. I mean, you look like you were really dazed. I mean, but
yeah. Did Chewy tell you about what happened?
Yeah, you didn't remember it or something.
Yeah. I came to because I turned to Chewy.
I think he broke your hand and he told you to forget about it.
The first punch of the fight, I broke my hand.
Yeah.
And so my next memory is turning to Chewy and saying, "Man, I think I broke my hand." This is in the room afterwards, the back room.
Nice.
And he goes, "Yeah, I know." And I'm like, "Okay. Hey, did I fight?" And he's like, "Yeah, Brent, you fought." Did I win? Yeah, Brent, you won. And he's got this real concerned look on his face. I'm like, well, how did I win? Was it a decision? Yeah. Was it a unanimous decision or a split decision? It was a unanimous decision. Okay. Man, why are you looking at me like that? And he's like, Brent, we've had this conversation like 7 times in a row.
Holy shit.
And my dad has since verified this too because my dad was there.
How does that make you feel? I mean, are you concerned as
I
far
am
as like any kind of?
I am.
Or do you feel like it was more like psychologically just checked out and went to autopilot? Or do you feel like you were hit pretty hard?
Memory's a funny thing. After watching the video of that fight, I do have a few like, oh yeah, that happened. And one of the things was the referee came in I remember being real confused. The referee, excuse me, the doctor.
Right.
And the doctor came up to me and said, "Son, what day is it?" And I kind of looked around, and I was like, well, there's Marius Saromski's, and I'm in a cage, and I'm wearing gloves. And I had spent, like, that season on Bellator, because they used to run seasons.
Right.
That season was the first season they changed from Friday night to Thursday night.
Okay.
And I was real concerned that all my friends were going to forget that and, like, tune in on Friday night and miss my fight. So I must have said a million times, don't forget, it's on Thursday, not Friday. It's on Thursday, not Friday. It's on Thursday, not Friday. So that guy comes in and says, what day is it? I'm like, it's Thursday. And he's like, all right, he's fine. Go ahead. Right back at it.
Shit,
I also have another funny memory of trying to do a move and, like, grabbing. I don't even remember what it was at this point, but I should have been grabbing underhanded with my hand, and I was grabbing overhanded. And I remember looking at my hand and feeling like it was a different, like it wasn't part of me.
It wasn't your hand.
Yeah, and I was like, why? I've trained this move. Why am I doing this wrong? Well, now I know it's because I was on Queer Suite.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But, I did get a brain scan. I had to have surgery on my hand for breaking it.
I remember you broke first metacarpal. You had plate put in.
Yep, I still have that plate. I had that same surgery on both hands.
Right, I remember.
And the plate in my left hand is still in there. The plate in my right hand came out.
So they took it out.
Yeah.
Was your body just kind of growing?
The break was in a different place, and the plate was higher, and I couldn't make a total fist.
Okay.
So I had like 12 fights where we would have to build a pad in front of on top of my knuckles because my index finger's knuckle would stick out past the knuckle that you punch with.
Yeah, no, so it's not good.
No. But yeah, before my doctor watched that fight, my orthopedic surgeon's a good friend of mine, and before he was my orthopedic surgeon, it's worth mentioning, he's just a good friend of the family, and he watched the fight, and he was actually kind of mad, and he was like, the next time somebody asks you what day it is, you say January, like you don't know. You should not have kept fighting.
But you only had, that was one fight that was that night. That was after your match. Is that correct?
Yeah. One day I went through and I counted up all the concussions, and this is only from fighting, and only times that I know I was concussed. Not like, I got a headache or I got my bell wrong or whatever. And I came to like 12 or 13.
Really?
And I don't know how many concussions are too many, but I think Baker's dozen is probably too many.
Yeah, probably.
The good news is that surgeon would not do surgery on me until I had my brain scanned.
Okay.
And that brain scan was good. So, knock on wood.
Do you feel like your memory's pretty good? I mean, do you feel like any problems with your memory or?
Not that I know of. I mean, I feel like my memory's pretty decent. Yeah, I don't. I'm hoping I dodged a bullet.
Was that a reason to kind of, I mean, because you were still, you retired, how old were you? 30?
Well, it was January of 14.
So you're 32 now?
So I'm 32. So yeah, I was
getting ready
to turn 30.
So you're still in your prime, really?
Yeah, I mean, physically, yeah.
Physically in your prime. So what kind of, was there anything that kind of told you
there's a couple things. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that the head injury didn't play a role into it. I mean, I have 2 kids. My youngest had just been born. It was kind of funny. My first son was born a week before, or maybe 2 weeks before I fought Rick Hahn. And my youngest son was born a week after I fought Rick Hahn.
Right.
So Rick Hahn is like tied to my family really strong. But yeah, I don't want my kids wiping my ass when I'm 40. You know what I mean? 45. I forget their names. And so that's a part of it. The other part is, I mean, it's really tough to make a living as a fighter. Very, very tough. You don't get paid to train.
Right.
You don't get paid to not fight. You only get paid to fight. That's it.
Well,
and so,
do you? I mean, as far as like Bellator, was that a pretty good experience for you? I know. Where'd you? As far as your fighting, did you fight Cage Inferno at all? Did you fight any of those smaller shows in Louisville? I remember you fighting in Bellator actually at 4th Street. I remember that fight.
Well, that was Bellator.
And that was when you got that was a fight to get into the tournament.
It was. That was my 3rd or 4th fight for them. I had a couple fights for them before then.
How was that? I mean, how's the experience fighting?
Fighting in Louisville was awesome. I did actually fight once before in Louisville.
Okay.
It was kind of sketchy. I had to get paid. It was an all amateur show.
Okay.
And this was back when like the commission wasn't showing up to every show, but they were afraid they were going to show up. So they paid me through a sponsor, like under the table, that kind of thing. But that was a long time ago. That I had that fight.
How did you get in contact with Bellator? How did that come to fruition?
Man, well, I was training with Eric Haycraft at the time, and Eric was doing not only my training but my management. Fighting me,
and
and
you did kickboxing under him.
That's right.
Just to clarify,
Dutch style kickboxing. An excellent trainer, really good kickboxer, and he. I can't guess his motivations, but he, decided that I needed to work with a management company that could maybe, get me farther than he could. Right. And so he hooked me up with Brian Butler, the owner of Sucker Punch Entertainment.
Okay. Yeah.
He knew him because, if I remember this correctly, one of the sort of business partner, financial partners of Sucker Punch Entertainment, kind of like behind the scenes, was really involved or is really involved in the kickboxing scene in the U.S.
Okay.
And so Eric knew him through like tournaments and stuff. I can't say enough for Brian Butler. Those guys are killing it. They're doing really well. He manages Joanna Joanchek or what?
Yeah. She's like the
champ,
featherweight, or I don't even know what she is. 115,
whatever that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
And,
at UFC, yeah.
Strawweight, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, strawweight.
And he manages Felice Herrig, and he manages a couple other fighters in the UFC. And they were one of the first super management groups or whatever.
Okay.
I've got a lot of respect for that guy, and I'll tell you why. I haven't told this story in public before, but I had a fighter. It's not really important who, but like a relatively well-known fighter who I'd crossed paths with a number of times training, and we'd fought on a couple cards together. And he came to me and was starting to get into the management the management scene or whatever. Okay. And I had some coaches that were kind of in my ear a little bit about like, oh, you shouldn't. They weren't really happy with Sucker Punch for stupid reasons. Like, I now know enough. The benefit of hindsight. But on the off chance that Brian ever hears this or any of his friends ever hear this, I mean, I had this guy come into my ear and say, "Hey, man, I'd love to manage you." He cut the price tag in half.
Right.
I'm gonna take half of what you're getting. I'm gonna take care of you, this and that, and whisper sweet nothings in my ear. And I was young and I was impressionable, and I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll have a lawyer. I'll send him a letter. You don't even have to worry about it." And then one day, after a fight that I lost, actually, Brian called and was like, "All right, man. Well, I was going to let you get through that fight, but now we need to talk. I got this fucking letter. Like, what the hell?"
Right.
And I kind of stammered, like, "Oh, well, you've got so many fighters, and I didn't know, and blah blah blah." And he really put up a fight to stay with me. To keep me, which I was surprised about. I figured he'd be like, fuck it, I don't want Brent.
Right.
And he really put up a fight to keep me. And what I respect the most about him was that when I decided to stay with him, he continued to work hard for me for the rest of my career, and he made me a lot of money.
Awesome.
And Brian Butler, I now realize at the end of the day, sold me to Bellator. Bellator was not super interested in me.
Right.
I had an offer from them. I had an offer from the UFC at one point. And that was all Brian's doing. That was all, him hand delivering me.
So what was kind of what made you choose Bellator?
Well, Bellator seemed like I'd be a larger slice of a larger slice of a smaller pie.
Right.
It seemed like I'd probably get to fight a little more. I was really concerned about like being shelved. Which ironically, Bellator's tournament system at the time ended up hurting me more than it helped me.
Well, yeah, if you got injured, you were done for.
I waited 8 months to fight Marius Saramskis, and then I broke my hand, and then I waited 8 months for the next tournament.
Right.
It was tough. So, and you look at that, and then I had 2 fights after that, and then I retired. I mean, that was a big reason. Fighting once in 16 months by no real fault of Bellator's.
Right.
I was injured, but all the money was in the tournament. You know, those guys, even now, those guys on those undercards are making a couple thousand.
Yeah, like $3,000 to $5,000 at Bellator. Yeah,
and you know, there's guys in the UFC that are making $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a fight. Yeah, you know, and that's if they win. So it's tough. It's a tough way to make a living.
So when you how did things change for you once you got to Bellator? I mean, actually, once you won or made, I think you were a welterweight tournament one, and you were a lightweight tournament as well.
Yeah. That was really, man, that probably took a couple years off my life.
The lightweight?
Oh, man.
Cutting weight and stuff.
And guys see me now, and you know, it's funny. I always joke that training with my kickboxing coach for a long time gave me body dysmorphia. But it actually kind of did a little bit where, you know, in that I didn't see myself for who I was. And so Eric, again, he's a great kickboxing coach, but his strength and conditioning planning was run and then run some more, and then do some kickboxing and then run some more. Don't lift weights. Strength training makes you slow. You know, all these very, you know, kind of old school methods. And so when I fought Chris Lozano, it was the first round of a tournament. I lost. I got my brains mushed up real good. That was one of those fights where I dropped him real early. Okay. And then I spent the whole rest of the fight just wading into punches, trying to get him again. Yeah, because those punches didn't hurt. You know, I felt like I was winning. Right. And watching that fight afterwards, that was stupid. So, anyways, the week before that 170 fight was 173. I cut like 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds by the time everything was said and done. And Chris Lozano, of course, cut from 190, 195, whatever it is. You know, like you do. Right. And I just got bullied. I mean, by the third round, I was just exhausted. And the problem with running for fighting young fighters is that fighting is not an aerobic sport. Fighting is, especially clinching, grappling, wrestling, is an anaerobic sport, and there's a lot of isometric
just elements explosiveness to that. And just, you know.
And strength plays a huge role in that. Sure. And so I started training with a strength and conditioning coach that had me doing some weight training. Interestingly enough, the biggest impact he had on my life was not weightlifting. I mean, I definitely changed my body a lot. But that had more to do with my diet, my dietary changes that I made than it did the weightlifting. People thought that, like, oh, you just started pumping iron. And, most of what I did with Ryan Brown, my strength and conditioning coach, was injury prevention stuff. I was just injured from not taking care of myself and from running all the damn time. My knees, my hips, my shoulders were all shot. But yeah, what happened was after that fight, I said, oh man, this sucks. Getting bullied around by Doug Limas and, you know.
He's huge.
Although I won that fight, I'd like to point out. But the bigger one, welterweights. Right. Screw this. Let's go to 155. And so December of the year before that lightweight tournament, we had a test cut. I made a test cut to 155. It went fine. I weighed in on Sunday and then had like a crazy heavy sparring session on Monday to test it out. Sure. Felt good. And then ended up doing it. Went to the welterweight tournament. The lightweight tournament. Fought J.J. Ambrose, won that fight. That was an easy cut. Fought Thiago Michel, a great kickboxer. The most disappointing fight of my career that I won. Like that fight in my mind is a negative because I felt like I sort of sold myself out. I didn't fight like myself.
As far as what? Like what do you think you did different?
I was coached to not try and submit him. Don't try and mount him. Don't try and submit him. Get on top, hold him for points, hammer him with knees to the body.
What was the purpose?
And that's what to win on points. And I made a career out of not doing that. Right. And so when I did that, I really felt embarrassed. Really, is the fact.
So what was the advantage of you trying to finish him on points versus finishing?
Because what I was told was, well, if you get mount, guys just escape mount too easily. And so instead of, hey, maybe you should grapple more and get better at mount, the coaching was, don't go to mount. Okay. Get to side control, stay in side control, hammer knees. Okay. And I sort of turned my brain off and did as I was told. Sure. And won. Immediately went backstage and called my wife, crying my eyes out, just like embarrassed. And of course, she was super happy for me. But the behind the scenes thing that people don't know was those first two weight cuts went great, but 3 weight cuts in 3 months is rough. Right. That weight cut for Rick Hahn probably took a couple years off my life. I mean, it took me 8 to 10 hours to cut, something like 8 or 9 pounds.
Okay.
Maybe longer than that. And I mean, I was hallucinating. It was not good at all.
What was the difference? Why was that weight cut so difficult?
Sometimes that happens. Ironically, the next really bad cut I had was the second time I fought Rick Hahn with Chewy. And it was just circumstantial. I can point to a few things that I think may have played into it, but the fact of the matter is, sometimes the weight just doesn't come off the way. Okay. Guys have a method.
Do you think it was diet related, or
No, because my diet was about the same. My starting weight before the cut was about the same.
Okay.
But there's just times that the body doesn't give it up, man.
Right.
Yeah. And cutting weight is really not smart. I cut a lot of weight because I was a tweener in sizes.
Right. You're kind of.
I was a little too, especially for most of my career, I was a little too small for a welterweight, but I was too big for 55. I don't know. If I had it to do over again, I probably would have just sucked it up and tried to be like Renzo Gracie and just fight anybody. Screw the weight.
You pretty much did. I mean, you did. How do you feel like, you kind of brought your wife into the, you mentioned your wife.
Right.
And your kids. How was that for her, man, watching you fight? Watching you really go at it?
Man, she is like the greatest. She's been super supportive. We had a really explicit conversation, because this is how I do things, when we, in our first little efficiency apartment when we were 20, 21, when we first met each other, because we met, and within days of meeting each other, told our respective friends and family that we met the person we were going to marry. That's awesome. Didn't know that about each other.
Right.
We didn't know that we were saying that.
Didn't know you said that.
And we just clicked right away. And I actually made it to the very finals of the selection process of season 3 of The Ultimate Fighter. Okay. They took 16 people. I was in the final 18. I was one of the two.
What was the weight class for that?
185.
Okay. Oh shit.
Yeah. And I thought, oh damn, I was almost just in the UFC on accident. And I'm not really training like a professional. Yeah. So I had this conversation with Emily, which was like, I kind of want to put all my eggs in this basket.
Sure.
My big deal was I didn't want to be 30 and still kind of going to school and kind of working and kind of fighting. I wanted to me, success would be fighting full-time at some point in my life.
Sure.
Doing nothing but fighting.
Well, yeah, that's what I got kind of around.
So, yeah, she only missed a few fights. She missed my first 2 fights before we met one another. And then she missed a few fights when she was too pregnant with Will to travel.
So she would come to the fights.
Oh yeah, I would get 2 corner passes, and I'd bring Eric and her. That'd be it. So
she'd be in your corner.
She'd be in my corner. She'd film. She'd cheer, and she made every fight. She made all.
What was it? I mean, from her perspective, what do you think? I mean, watching you kind of get in there. I mean, what kind of feelings did she have?
I'm sure she was terrified. I mean, I don't know. I mean. Well, I mean, we were friends when I was fighting, so I mean, you know how intense it is to watch somebody.
I'm telling you, I was nervous.
Yeah,
I was nervous. I remember I was actually, I don't know, maybe I was in St. Louis or somewhere on vacation, and I was in the gym. They had like a little gym at the hotel we were at, and I was like watching the fight there, and I was like freaking out. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's insane. It's insane just because like at the time we were training, and I was just like, I mean, you just get nervous. I mean, you get so nervous.
One of my closest friends in the world, Joe Heinck, he's a black belt under Soneca. We were training partners together when we were both MMA fighters.
I trained with Joe.
Yeah, you know Joe from back in the day. Joe fought objectively one of the most boring fights I've ever fought in my entire life. I've ever seen in my entire life. Not his fault. Fought a really, really good wrestler who was not very good at everything else, and just got wrestle fucked for 15 minutes. I mean, we've all seen it happen.
Sure.
I paced the room, rubbing my hands together and freaking out. Like, it does not matter how boring the fight is when it's your friend.
Right. Exactly.
And so I'm sure that was intense for her. But I was better than most. I mean, I was okay.
No,
so I did well. I was very lucky to get out of there with little to no injury, and did very well. And so, especially coming up the ranks, and so I'm really pleased that she was there because I really enjoyed having her there. We're those, that asshole couple that are like legitimately best friends, and everybody kind of like gag, like they sort of like, it's tough, But we really are that couple, and so it was really important to me to have her there. And
that's kind of all she's known. I mean, she's known you've been a fighter the whole time.
That's true. I like to remind her when she's like, you're retired and you're training every day,
right?
Like, every day, really? And like, yeah, I always joke with her that you knew what you signed up for. Like I was pretty upfront at the beginning.
What do you? I mean, as far as your training now, what's your motivation? Like, since you've retired, and I mean, you're focused on jiu-jitsu. You're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And you're competing more. We talked about that. What's kind of your motivation now? I mean,
interestingly, competition is not really my motivation.
Okay.
I do enjoy it a great deal. I'm driven a lot by the desire to compete. But that, to me, is a separate part from the martial artist in me. My goal is to be to constantly improve my jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu, I think, it gets lost sometimes, especially in certain circles, that jiu-jitsu is a technique sport.
Yeah,
and one of my big goals, as silly as it sounds, and I'm not advocating not being in shape, but one of my big goals is that when I'm not in shape, my jiu-jitsu is still good.
Sure, I mean, yeah.
So one of the biggest things from that B.J. Nelson fight match that I was really pleased with was that I was not in particularly great shape for that match, and we ended up going 30 minutes or whatever, and I ended up winning.
Yeah.
Based purely on technique. And I come from an MMA background. I compete a lot, and so in the whole, I think you're probably a little privy to the sport versus self-defense.
Sure. Yeah.
We'll call it a debate. I hate the fact that it gets put into terms of like two teams, but we'll simplify it for the sake of argument. People are usually surprised to find when they talk to me that I'm more on team self-defense than I am on team sport. Because I know a lot of guys that have great jiu-jitsu when they're in shape. And when they're not in shape and they don't have the energy to just like go, they're not as good. Now, for tournaments, you have to be like that. 10 minutes, is not a very long time. And
yeah, especially if you're doing submission only, you can gas for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's a big deal to me that I think, you start with the defense. That's been a big thing over the last couple of years, is that I've really gone back I've tried to go back to the drawing board and make my defense stronger. With that sort of, if I don't lose, I win kind of mentality.
Sure.
With the mind of eventually winning. I wouldn't be comfortable. Metamorphs rules 20 minutes and you just kind of hold on and survive and then yay, I drew. That bugs me a little bit.
Do you like doing like submission only versus points?
I do prefer submission only. I don't hate on the whole point scene. Again, I'm not that team. I'm not real fond of the IBJJF rules. I'm not real fond. A little bit of it is just like the punk rock in me, that I don't like the idea that a privately held company sort of like raised their hand and declared themselves the mainstream. We are the governing body. I don't know about that, and there's a couple in specific rules in particular that I don't like. Seneca's real fond of saying, eventually fighting's going to be illegal, and what he means by that is they're going to make so much illegal that at one point it's just going to be like this game that's
it is kind of a game. Really, and you talk about sport jiu-jitsu versus self-defense, and I think certain stuff like berimbolo or inverted stuff is not going to work in the street. You're not going to go inverted and somebody's going to stomp your head.
Sure. And I'm cool with all that stuff. Frankly, I really am. And again, I repeat myself a lot, so any of my students will have heard me say this a million times, but you look at like one of the meows who all they do is berimbolo inverted all day, every day. Like, when the drunken frat bro at the club tries to start some shit with you, the guy that doesn't know jiu-jitsu, you're still going to win that fight.
Sure,
because learning jiu-jitsu is like cheating. To people that don't know jiu-jitsu, we're like cheating. I do think that it's important that we pay homage to what this was originally. Jiu-jitsu is about fighting. And just as bothersome to me as people who only like worship at the altar of the IBJJF are the guys that say, well, MMA is a real fight. Well, MMA is not a real fight either.
The rules,
There's different considerations, and I think part of jiu-jitsu's strength is its ability to decide whether you want to go to the ground or not, or if you get taken to the ground, the ability to get back up. Because my favorite self-defense move is running the hell away. Because I'm not trying to fight two dudes, or I'm not trying to fight somebody with a knife or whatever it is. I'm trying to run away. And hypothetically, a jiu-jitsu guy should be really fucking hard to hold down.
Sure.
But yeah, I do. I'm really about, and I've stolen this phrase from Faraz Zabadi. I was lucky to get to meet him and be around him a lot through Bellator. And obviously now he's relatively well known, the head instructor of TriStar.
Yeah, in Canada.
Up in Toronto, I think. And but what he calls the universal jiu-jitsu. And I think it behooves us to spend 90% of your time or more focused on the universal jiu-jitsu. And the way I define universal jiu-jitsu is that which works with little to no modification from gi to no gi to MMA to self-defense. Those are 4 different modalities. And most of my jiu-jitsu right now, I'll say, I do enjoy getting into the sport weeds, getting out into I do enjoy that. But most of my stuff like that takes very little transition, very little change, if any, to change without the gi, or if strikes are involved, or if you're in a street situation,
So you feel like you maybe don't work like certain grips, certain lapel grips.
I try and be really. I don't mind the lapel grips sometimes.
People wear shirts, so
they do. They really do. Seneca likes to say you'll never fight naked.
Yeah. People wear collars. They have collars. Yeah.
And depending on it, a lot of it is just. And I was just having this conversation with some friends of mine who train Krav Maga, who are interested in coming over to jiu-jitsu, but they have some apprehensions about the gi. And one of the things that I said is that, it's not gi or no gi. Like, it's not that simple. What's more important than that is how you use the gi.
Sure.
I think if you focus too much on grabbing the pants, if you focus too much on one grip, I'll speak on specifically. A grip that I enjoy in sport in the gi is the end of the sleeve, right? Like an umbrella grip or a tips grip. Wow, I've heard it called a bunch of different things. Because that grip is not really analogous to anything without the gi. You can't grab the wrist; it's not the same.
Right.
It's not as strong. That spider guard grip is really super hard to replicate anywhere else. And so if you build your game around that, man, you're going to have some trouble. But, I'm a big believer in that if you train too much in the gi, then your offense is going to suffer a little bit because the friction and the grips tends to make people a little lazy, right? However, if you train too much no gi, then your defense is going to struggle a little bit because it's easy to get a little lazy in no-gi, especially if you're not constantly training with people that are better than you. It can be easy to just sort of, I call it shaking the etch-a-sketch, just like rip your arm out or rip away. And
you got to be so much tighter, with no-gi, you have to be so much tighter,
So I think there's a balance there.
Yeah.
And I think, you're not going to find hardly any jiu-jitsu guys that don't, this is a false argument anymore. Most top-level jiu-jitsu guys, not that I'm saying I'm a top level, but most jiu-jitsu instructors are going to say you got to train both.
Right.
Both have their advantages.
Well, you got instructors out there that, just like Eddie Bravo, he's all about, gi pants, but then no.
Yeah, it's interesting,
jacket.
right? It's interesting. Yeah,
I don't.
It's the friction, I guess. He wants the friction on that, and it's yeah, whatever. Do you? I guess. I was lucky enough to train with Eddie once. He's a very good instructor. He's very, very technical. He's probably the most technical no-gi instructor that I've ever seen in terms of 1,000 steps to each move. And training with Seneca, I'm used to that. Seneca will stop the whole class if one person's pinky is out of a line. He's famous for that. He's very, very technical. And so I was impressed by a lot of his technique. Again, philosophically, maybe he and I disagree, but but that doesn't devalue anything that he does.
Is there anyone you try to mold your game after, your jiu-jitsu game? Anyone that you kind of body style or the way they play, the way they attack, the way they defend?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple guys that I try and emulate, and really I try and be this mech warrior of I take his butterfly guard his top game and his some of my favorite guys across the board. When you're talking about my all-time favorites, you're talking Jacare.
Yeah, he's awesome.
I love the way that he transitions gi to no gi. I love his top game. I love his pressure. I love his explosion. I'm a huge Marcelo Garcia fan.
I love Marcelo Garcia.
And Marcelo, I was just telling somebody the other day, he's the kind of guy that even when he says something with which I maybe end up disagreeing, on philosophical grounds, or maybe he likes to do something a way that I like to do it another way or something, Marcelo can say literally anything, and I will give it credence just because Marcelo said it. Like, I will seriously consider it, and I will give it due credence because Marcelo said it, because I hold his opinion in such high regard.
I've actually, I actually end up getting some of his books that are out of print, and
right.
Fucking overpay,
yes,
insanely, but man, it's just the detail and just, I mean, he's really, the way that he explains stuff, breaks it down, and then watch videos of him work, and I mean,
doing the same thing to multiple people,
right? And you know it's coming. You know it's coming.
I first became real obsessed with Marcelo probably when I was a purple belt. And I got real obsessed with the arm drag, and now most people that I train with will tell you that I'm a huge advocate of the arm drag. I use it a lot. I use it in a lot of different situations. I use it in the gi. I use it without the gi. I use it in self-defense seminars. I use it everywhere.
I think X guard is something. I mean, I've tried to incorporate that. And there's so many different ways that can go. I mean, there's so many different pathways you can take from X guard.
Absolutely.
Which is, I mean, for me, it's kind of opened up my game a little bit.
I think guys that say like, "Oh, well, that's not very street specific," that's one of those things where I disagree.
That can be, for sure.
Yeah,
if you end up in that area,
give me X guard, and then you punch me, ready to go. I'll take my chances every day, because as soon as you try and punch me, you're off balance.
Off balance, or your ankle's vulnerable, your foot's vulnerable.
My game lately has been really revolved, or my bottom game, I should say, lately, has revolved a lot around what he calls single leg X. I prefer calling it ashigarami just because I'm a judo guy, and that's a judo position. And I think like the Donahauer guys call it ashigarami. But whatever you call it, single leg X. And so the sort of tip of that spear most recently has been transitioning from single leg X, which I've been focusing on for like 8 months maybe, to true X guard. Because as guys go to stuff that knee and step over single leg X, you have to be able to transition to X guard. So that's a real that's something that I've really been focusing on a lot in my game.
Is there a reason why you think, John Donner's got, all those guys, Gary Tonin, do you think, is there a reason why you feel like they're as successful as they are? I mean, is there anything you feel like that they do? I mean, obviously they say Donner's like a freaking genius, and
I got to train with Donahauer when, that was probably 7 years ago or something. I have to go back and look. Bellator took us to New York a couple times.
Yeah, he trains ways under Renzo Gracie.
Yeah, he's the head instructor at the Manhattan, the headquarters school. And I've only been to New York a few times, but when I'm there, that's where I train. I have an open invitation. I've got a pretty good relationship with those guys. I've got a pretty good relationship with Igor Gracie.
Okay.
Who is Renzo's cousin, and Sonek is cousins with them. Actually, Renzo's coming to town to teach here.
That's awesome.
In a few months, and Renzo and Soneca grew up together. They're like best friends, and it's probably, I always joke, he's like the most famous guy that Soneca's friends with, like really, really close with.
He's probably one of my favorite Gracies.
He's my favorite.
Such a badass.
He is my favorite, hands down.
You remember the story about him? People tried to jump him in New York, and he did the raccoon eyes.
Yeah, he live tweeted it. Yeah. I mean, come on.
And then he walked around the block to find the other guy.
And then
fucking beat his ass. I loved it.
What I aspire to, because a little secret about me is that, like I said earlier, most of my motivation is based on, I'm motivated by this voice in the back of my head telling me, if you don't do that, you're a coward, right? And it's because I was a truly, truly scared little kid. I grew up scared.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, if somebody walked in this room right now and wanted to fight, I'd be terrified, right? But that's why I do what I do, to sort of prove that I don't feel the way I feel. So one of the things that I'm so impressed by Renzo Gracie is anybody, anytime, anywhere, any weight class, fuck you, jiu-jitsu. Yeah. He just trusts his jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And that's a huge deal to me. I mean, that's a huge, huge deal to me, because I'm not that in my core. I can choose to be that. I choose to make myself that. But man, I'm a scared little bitch. And Renzo will fight anybody.
I mean, you think he might be scared.
He might be.
Just put on good front.
You tell him. I'm not going to ask him.
I'm not telling him shit. But I've seen him.
But to go back to your earlier question, when I got to train there, I was a fan, at the risk of sounding like a freaking jiu-jitsu hipster, but, it's no surprise, it's no secret that John Donahauer right now is sort of like in vogue,
Sure.
He is the flavor of the month. He deserves to be. He is somebody that I will say, having gotten to train with him before he was really in the spotlight, he was sort of one of those guys like, you know, that band that nobody in the mainstream has heard of yet, but all musicians respect? You know, all the high-level jiu-jitsu and MMA guys were like, oh, John Donahauer's the truth. And I got to train with him, and when he speaks and when he teaches, he sounds like he's quoting something. He sounds like he's quoting from like this ancient tome of jiu-jitsu wisdom. I've never been taught anything by any instructor more succinctly and more more well done than him. I can't think of the word.
It might be his accent.
The accent definitely helps. But he speaks, it's almost funny because he never says, he never says, he never says, when I teach, just last week I taught a position and I'm like, man, why is everybody screwing this position up? And then I look around and I'm like, oh, there's this one thing I should have emphasized. Hold on, everybody. Stop. I should have emphasized this before. I'm sorry. But he is the opposite end of that spectrum. And he'll say things like, now, as we move our head to the left, we find ourselves in an interesting position where the right arm is perpendicular. And he talks like that for 20 minutes at a time. No ums, no ahs, no like... we find ourselves in a curious position wherein the left arm is moving counterclockwise to the... It's like he has it memorized.
What was his background?
A PhD in philosophy.
Okay.
And he was finishing his dissertation in philosophy when he discovered jiu-jitsu. And he dropped out of everything. He says dropped out of school. He dropped out of... It seems like he just dropped out of life. And dedicated all that brain power to jiu-jitsu. And the two things that you hear about him that are true are that, A, you'll never see him not in a rash guard. He was in Matt Serra's wedding in a rash guard. Sports coat, dress slacks, dress shoes, rash guard.
Is there a reason that it's just
he likes rash guards?
His thing?
He's just a weird dude. He just likes rash guards.
Right.
The other thing is, he spends all day that he's not teaching just like sitting in the gym thinking, like in a back room. So I would be there. When I was there, the last time I was there, I was lucky. Gianni Grippo was still there. It was before he made the jump to Marcelo's. And so he would have these like 6 or 7 a.m. drilling sessions. It'd be like 3 or 4 guys. We would drill 3 positions for 2 hours. I mean, it was unbelievable how this guy drills.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was great. And Donahauer would sit in the back room or like sit in a room by himself, just in his thoughts. And then every once in a while, he'd come out and he'd be like, hey, excuse me. And he'd pull somebody over like, hey, will you here, put me in half guard and make it under? Okay. And he'd put himself in some position and he'd move a little bit or he would do whatever it was he was rolling around in his head. And he'd be like, okay, thanks. And then he'd go in the back again. And he's just like developing a system, I guess. Or, that guy deserves the respect and he deserves the sort of...
Just a great mind.
He's a great mind. And I really respect a lot of what he has to say about jiu-jitsu. I've learned a lot getting to train with him, the few times that I got to train with him. I learned a lot. The seminar I did with Gary Tonin. Gary came to Louisville. I did a seminar with him. I got a lot out of that.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're great minds in jiu-jitsu. That's right.
What would you say maybe like from MMA, what's one of probably your best memories?
In MMA?
Sure.
Man, I think...
Favorite victor, favorite fight, favorite...
Yeah, that's where I'm going. I think my favorite win was probably the win over Douglas Lima, who is, rightfully gaining a lot of recognition now. He's my boy. I respect him a lot. I like him a lot. I don't think he's a fighter, so he'd probably be a little bothered by me bringing it up. But I don't think he's going to be like offended by me bringing up the fact that I beat him.
If he ever hears it.
Right, if he ever hears it. He's a great fighter, man. He's a great, great fighter. One of my biggest regrets is that I didn't get to fight him again. I was supposed to fight him after Zaromski's, and I broke my hand and they cut it. Yeah, I tried to get Bellator to let that fight happen. I wanted that fight to happen, and they wouldn't let it happen. I wanted them to give me like 6 weeks, and I would have fought him. But they needed 4, so what are you going to do?
Yeah,
but I had a loss before him. I had never lost 2 in a row. I had a loss that I really shouldn't have lost. And then I got brought in to lose to Douglas Lima for real. I had a 1-fight contract with this show. It was for the title. It was in his hometown. It was at the Phillips Arena where the Atlanta Hawks play.
Okay. I think that's where the fights are.
Yeah.
UFC 201 or something.
I think you might be right.
Robbie Lawler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was filled with like his fans, his students, his friends, his family. The place shook with boos when I walked out. It was awesome. And in retrospect, I think we were both kind of nervous of each other's power to stand and trade shots. So we clinched a lot. And I ended up using jiu-jitsu. I ended up using one of the only sort of Eddie Bravo positions that I use. I don't use a ton of rubber guard, but I use a position that he calls meat hook.
Okay.
Again, I only know it's called that because that's it's the one rubber guard position that I use. I hit him with a triangle in the first round, and I couldn't get him out. I couldn't tap him. We were buddies, and we hung out later, and he told me years later that he was almost out in that first round, which made me feel better because I was beginning to doubt myself after that fight. Like, why couldn't I put him away on that? So in the second round, we go again. I catch him in another triangle. He's not tapping. I transition to the arm bar. I have the triangle locked, but I'm arm barring him. He won't tap again. So I don't know. I hate trying to describe stuff in jiu-jitsu, but it was just so funny to me. People always talk about, I just break his arm. So think about this. I had him in a triangle with his arm extended. I passed his hand into my armpit and hugged my own thigh so that his hand was in my armpit, and I was deadlifting my hips into his elbow, belly down, as hard as I could, trying to break his arm. And it took me maybe 15 seconds of doing that before he finally tapped. And I tell people that it felt like when you're breaking a twig, and as it starts to and you kind of close your eyes and clench, oh, here it comes. That's the sensation that I had. That was my hips against his elbow, and that dude wouldn't tap. I mean, that was one of the toughest dudes I ever fought in my life. So that was a big one. That was a really big win for me. I wasn't supposed to. It was kind of cool getting to negotiate a contract because I only had a one-fight contract.
Well,
right?
You had some pull.
Yeah, and I was trying to, and they had to come. I got to come to the negotiating table with their belt.
That's awesome.
So that was a big victory for me. I really enjoyed that one.
What about BJJ from Jiu-Jitsu? What do you think? Any matches, any tournaments, and even, now you're one of the coaches, here at Core. Is that, getting your black belt? I remember being there. Your black belt was pretty cool.
A lot of the yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do remember you made that seminar and that belts promotion. That meant a lot to me. No, the thing that I get most of my satisfaction out of now is trying to articulate what it is I'm doing to my students and watching my students pick stuff up.
Yeah.
Or our students, so Nick and I students. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. In terms of best wins in jiu-jitsu, I was pretty stoked on that BJ Nelson one. We've talked about that a couple times.
Yeah.
I was big on that just because I'd lost to him a couple years before as a new black belt. He armbarred me. And I had that voice in the back of my head that was like, if I would have done this different, if I would have done that different, maybe it would have,
Yeah.
So that was nice to hit that. And BJ's a monster. He's just
He's tough, man. He had you some bad spots, and you worked your way out of it for sure. So
yeah, he had some real bad spots.
Yeah, you fought it.
And in my last tournament against a brown belt, I think he was a mixed division. I hit one of my, I
saw that video. He threw him.
Yeah, Yoko Tomoe to an arm bar. I was pretty pleased with that. But that was big because I'd never hit, that's one of my favorite throws. I hit it all the time in training, that Yoko Tomoe. There's actually a YouTube video of me teaching it for anybody interested, if they don't know what I'm talking about. And, but I had never hit that in competition, and I hit 2 that day.
That's awesome.
Now, one was against Cameron Knight, a stud black belt who ended up beating me in that match. But I threw him real big. So I was happy with that.
Yeah,
that was my consolation prize.
Yeah, for sure. I got, the tournament you did, I got actually, I guess one of your guys. I went against one of your guys. That was crazy. I can't remember the guy's name. I put him in 3 freaking submissions, and he just wouldn't tap, and I was like, oh fuck, what am I supposed to do now? And but no, this guy got me a helicopter, some shit, something or other. It sucked.
Yeah.
No, right away it was I remember this too. I tell everybody this story because I was he went the match. It was for 3rd place, and he had like injured his ankle or some shit. And I walk up to him like, "Hey man, are you all right? Are you okay?" And he just looked at me like, "I'm gonna fuck your world up." and I just didn't expect it. He pulled me in the guard and got me in this. And that was probably one of the worst memories for sure, because losing in like 10 seconds in front of everybody, and you're like, shit, did that just happen? I mean, it just screws me. But yeah,
I can't remember who that would be. People are always surprised that I won't say it's a problem, but the thing about core is that we don't have we have a lot of guys that don't compete that are really good.
Yeah.
That are really good and don't compete. They're just not interested.
Competing's, man, it's. I'll tell you, my first competition ever, my first match ever, I threw up on my mouth guard.
That's hilarious.
I was so nervous that after I lost the match, and I lost the first match, I ate a protein bar, and then I pulled my mouthpiece out, and I was like, "Dad, you probably need to rinse this guy out," because it was pretty nasty. But yeah, I mean, you guys have a great gym. You have a lot of tough guys.
I'm really proud of it. It's a good environment. I mean, and it's I speak so highly of Derby City as well. I knew I was there for a little while when Soneka left. I came out and I taught at Derby City for a year or so, and then
it was awesome, man. We loved having you. It was cool.
And I miss you guys a lot. But when I was there, I also missed my boys here too, who I came up through. So it was.
Well, I think
I'm glad we've got a good relationship.
It's a good, like the jiu-jitsu community is kind of interesting. I mean, you have some places that are really open. Like I know Chewy, my instructor, is like all about everybody training together. Having open mats, and you guys have come for open mats and stuff. And it's just, it's just building. I think there's a camaraderie there with jiu-jitsu, for sure. That is, it's one of the things that addicts me to it. I mean, that makes me.
I respect the hell out of Chewy for doing that, and I think one of the things that I don't know if he explicitly thinks this in his mind or if he's just sort of doing it, but it really bugs me when instructors are like, "Oh, you can't train over there. You should only train with me."
Right.
Because I'm a firm believer in the open market.
Sure.
And I will invite anybody that wants to come out and train with me, and you train with me, and then you train with the guy down the street. And if you like what he's doing better, more than you like what I'm doing, go down over there. That's fine. Obviously, I believe, just like Chewy does, I believe very strongly in what I do. I don't just show up and show a random position every day and then go home. Like I've got a method to my madness. And there's very little in life that I believe in the way I believe in jiu-jitsu and the way that I believe in the
martial
arts. Why do you
think that is, man? What do you think is it about jiu-jitsu? Like,
I don't know. One day somebody's going to figure it out.
For me, I'll tell you the reason why. Like, my podcast is called, and I don't know why I want to do a podcast. Like, I'm a physical therapist, so I deal with injuries and stuff.
Sure,
but. For me, like the podcast was named The Jiu-Jitsu Therapist because for me it was like a mental therapy.
Sure.
Like it was just the craziest kind of mentally. We talked about this too earlier, and it's just such a mentally. I feel like a different person. Like I feel better after I train, and there's also a camaraderie there, like we talked about. It's just really. Just training is just. The way the feeling you get, I think, is just unmatched.
Well, and jiu-jitsu's got a lot of strengths, and we're going to be here a lot longer if I had to list them all. But I think it's a beautiful thing in that most other martial arts or combat sports are either sports,
right,
or they are self-defense systems.
Sure.
Right? Jiu-jitsu's strength, and this is why to circle back around to what we were talking about earlier, the self-defense versus sport is a little bit of a misnomer, because I think one without the other, you're shortchanging yourself.
Sure.
So like the guys that, I had a guy, I won't name the gym, it was a wonderful gym, I had a great experience, but because of this experience I won't name it, but I got to travel and I got to train at this gym that was like the most quote-unquote sport jiu-jitsu I've ever trained. And I was training with this really tough purple belt kid, like 20-year-old kid, and he's giving me this look, and the look was, come on, bro, and he's like pointing down to his hip, like, come on, like, what are you doing? And he was like, you're raping me. And I was like, I'm doing what?
He's reaping, not raping.
Reaping. Yes,
not
excuse
raping.
Me, I'll speak up. Reaping.
Brent is not a rapist.
I am not a rapist. I've said it before. I'll say it again. But it didn't even occur to me that my foot had crossed the almighty hip line.
So yeah,
right?
the midline, it crosses.
You can't cross from the outside in the midline. And he said, and I was like, oh yeah, my bad. I'm sorry, I forgot. Whatever it is. And so I undid it. And I guess later we were talking about it, and we had this like who's on first conversation where I said, well, in real jiu-jitsu, that's not illegal.
Sure.
And he was super confused by it. And he said, no, bro, I'm pretty sure that's illegal. And I laughed. I'm like, no, man, I'm just making a stupid joke. No, I'm saying like in real jiu-jitsu, like in actual real jiu-jitsu, it's not illegal. And he's like, no, bro. I'll look it up. It's for real illegal in real jiu-jitsu. And I thought, oh my God, this guy thinks that the IBJJF rule set is quote unquote real jiu-jitsu. Like this poor guy has limited himself to that mentality.
So that's like one of the rules. You don't really just the reaping or the. I guess you can't do any kind of twisting. I think just straight ankle lock, straight knees.
Well, when I started
that.
getting back into that guy Gavin Worth we were talking about, he considered himself more of a catch wrestler.
Okay.
And so when I started getting back into submission grappling, I emphasized I was learning a lot and training a lot of like ankle attacks, knee attacks, hip locks, and spine cranks. And I like a lot of that stuff. I really like it a lot. And so I think especially for black belts, for that to be illegal, it's funny to me that the jiu-jitsu community sort of stands around and wrings their hands and scratches their head and go, man, what are we going to do about all this 50-50 stalling, man? Oh, my God, it's such a conundrum. I have no idea. Well, allow heel hooks and problem solved.
Right, okay, that makes sense. No.
But I think what makes jiu-jitsu different is that it is a self-defense art at its heart, at its core. It is a self-defense art that has a sporting component. So I don't want to train boxing where everything's illegal but punching, and nothing against boxers. I'm just using this as an example. Like, there's only it's only sport. There's only this one very narrow mindset. Or you train with like the Tony Blar, like reality fighting type guys. The problem there is that when all your training is super deadly, serious, life-ending techniques, there's no way to really test yourself. There's no way to train that full speed. Right. I think one of the most genius ideas in all of martial arts history was Jigoro Kano and what has been called the judo paradox, which was when he took Japanese jiu-jitsu and he took out all of the quote-unquote dangerous techniques, the neck breaking, the all the stuff that was death moves, and he made this, again, heavy air quotes, safe sport that we call judo. The paradox is, now that it's safer, we can train it full speed. Well, if you ever needed to use it, God forbid, you're going to be used to using your technique against a person who is resisting full speed. And so that's the benefit of sport. We all have been in or seen or know about the jiu-jitsu gym that talks all this shit about the sport game and we do the real jiu-jitsu, we do the self-defense only, and they've got purple belts that couldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight. You know what I mean? They got purple belts that couldn't save their own lives because they roll like a couple of sloths like flowing around. They got instructors that don't roll anymore. It becomes a martial art again, like a strip mall karate joint.
I think the one thing about jiu-jitsu is you can actually go 100%.
Sure.
And it's fairly safe. When you get to a position where you're in trouble, you tap. And that's awesome. That's like start over, shake hands, start over, whatever. But I think that's one of, and that, like, I always listen to Joe Rogan, and he gives that example of like it's one of the, like, it's so pure because of that, because like not a lot of, if you spar, if you box, you're not always going 100%. You've got headgear on or that kind of stuff, or but in jiu-jitsu, you can actually go pretty much close to 100% and get somebody to the point where, their arm's about to break or they're about to go unconscious and they tap and then that's it and you start over. And that's the one thing I think longevity-wise, for me, I feel like jiu-jitsu is one of those things I could do long-term. That's why I feel like, are starting to, ramp up your jiu-jitsu because you're not fighting, because you probably realize that mixed martial arts is not a long-term endeavor, and there's some really injuries and really bad, things that
Getting
can
punched
come.
in the head, no matter how safe, is not a good idea.
Well, it's not. I don't know if getting punched in the head is ever safe.
No, never. And and you were sort of like hinting around about when I talk about the downside or whatever of sport, like what exactly I mean by that, and we talked about leg reaping.
Sure.
I'm a big fan, and again, this makes me sound like a sort of Johnny come lately because leg locks are very in vogue right
Sure.
now. Anybody that's trained with me knows I've been a leg lock fan for a long, long time.
Yes.
I really enjoy the leg game, and so I think it's silly to be like, this move is too effective to be allowed.
Sure.
Like that's ridiculous.
Well, I think
to
it's
me.
a progression of now it's jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu.
Exactly.
It's not
exactly
and
right.
We were talking about Tony Spencer is one of our black belts, and that's what we were talking about. It's like it's not you're going into a tournament where there's this guy's a karate guy. He knows
Right.
nothing about a triangle choke. Or,
Right.
It's jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu, and whose jiu-jitsu is more effective.
Mm-hmm. And that's the danger.
And that's the thing, and that's the progression, though. It doesn't mean that. That's some loud stuff. It doesn't mean that jiu-jitsu, that the leg game is going to be that dominant, because there may be somebody who may find a defense to that, and
Sure.
may find something else.
Of course.
And you may get
Remember when
progression.
deep half was like the only thing everybody
Yeah.
ever did, and then it was 50-50 was the only thing people ever did, and then it was Barambolos was
Yeah.
the only thing,
Yeah.
and like the thing, and people still do all of those moves, but
Sure.
they're not the entire game like it used to be. But you hit the nail on the head, and I think if I can issue a word of warning to my sport brethren, and I put myself in that
Sure.
category because it's so fun to train jiu-jitsu versus jiu-jitsu. I think it's really important to at least occasionally discuss, train, practice, think about what it looks like to train jiu-jitsu versus not jiu-jitsu.
Right. Well,
And
yeah.
I know a lot of guys who don't like the original self-defense techniques because they say, well, headlock, who's going to put you in a headlock? That's stupid. I'll tell you who's going to put you in a headlock. Every single dude who does not do jiu-jitsu.
That bro.
Every bro in America is going to grab your head immediately.
Sure.
And the good news is it's pretty easy to get out of.
Yeah.
You don't. I think, again, you go to the far end of the other spectrum, and I know guys who, for their brown belt test, have a brown belt headlock defense. Like, come on, dude.
Okay.
You don't. By the time you're a purple belt or brown belt, if your high water mark is still the drunk dude at the bar, you're doing it wrong. You do not need 18 headlock defenses. It's just not that difficult to get out of. But again, that comes back to the balance that we keep talking about.
Sure. Yeah, and I was going to ask you just as far as injuries, any really terrible injuries. I mean, as far as breaking your hand, I mean, with me being a physical therapist, I see a ton of injuries. I've had some pretty bad injuries myself. Is there anything that, as far as injury-wise, you've dealt with that's been hard to come back from? Or?
Yeah, I mean, both hands were bones breaking are a little straightforward. You put the bone back in place, you let it heal, you work around it. I always point to the most aggravating injury I ever had was not that serious, but I had a pretty severe strain of my psoas muscle, which runs, was it psoas? From the inside of the thigh through the
psoas,
groin.
yeah.
Psoas, yeah.
So psoas is more like the hip flexor.
Yes, exactly. It's one of the hip flexors, and it sort of ties in by your obliques through your hip into through your groin into your inner thigh. Now, find me something, especially in jiu-jitsu, that does not use that range of motion.
I mean, everything.
That was really super frustrating. I did that with Chewy, actually. After taking a couple, I was like a week or two off after a fight. I came back to the gym. I think maybe my hand was broken, but I was fat. I'd been partying and just relaxing after a fight and being cool. And Chewy and I have that kind of relationship where we'll be like, let's roll light. And then 30 seconds into it, we're both snarl because that's how we love to roll. We both love to roll heavy, and we're both aggressive dudes, and we're both, this whole time that I was off learning boxing, kickboxing, everything else, Chewy was just doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And he is pretty damn good. And so we have these knockdown, drag out matches, and I ended up pulling my psoas, and that ended up being an issue for 6 months. And then outside of that, I'm currently dealing with some rotator cuff stuff in my right arm that has translated into some elbow issues. I mean, I'm sure you see that when a major joint has an issue, it tends to follow itself down the line.
Compensate. Yeah,
yes.
you do things differently. So, for example, if it's your shoulder and you're throwing a punch, you may compensate, or you may do more of an elbow movement or less, or whatever. I'm not.
And so my whole right arm, I'm sort of dealing with some stuff right now. But I mean, again, I've had a continuity in the martial arts for 29 years. I started 3 or 4 years old, and I've been training. I have not taken a break from the martial arts in that long. Now, some days have been every day, and some days have been twice a week, and some days have been.
Sure.
But for the last 8 years, it's been multiple times per week, and so you're never 100%.
Right.
It's just the nature of the game.
What do you feel like? Just kind of, and I've always wanted to talk about this because I think now your boys are getting older, and finally your wife has kind of started a little jiu-jitsu.
Emily is super obsessed.
How is that for you? Like,
my God, you can't know. I mean, my wife started jiu-jitsu about 3 months ago. She's actually pretty good. I mean, you'd have to think she'd pick something up.
Yeah, watching you a lot too.
But she always talks about how great it is to have an instructor just at her fingertips. Like,
sure,
she asks me questions at home all the time, and we do private lessons all the time, quote unquote private lessons, where we just train together.
Private lessons.
Wink, nudge.
Yeah.
But
that's how babies are made.
That's right. 2 beautiful babies. But really, it's just as great for me to have a student just at my fingertips that I don't have to qualify everything. Like, she trusts that I'm going to give her my best possible answer. So she's really into it. My boys play jiu-jitsu. I think it's really important not to force your kids into anything.
And how old are your kids?
My oldest is 4. My youngest is 2. He'll be 3 in November.
Yeah.
So Will's understanding of jiu-jitsu is very. It speaks a lot to my belief in jiu-jitsu, because when Will watches me do jiu-jitsu and he cheers for me, the only thing he knows to cheer is be on top.
Okay.
Because that's rule 1. Job 1 is be on top. That's sexy thunder.
Holy crap!
Yeah,
what's happening?
We might be stuck here.
I hope not. We can snuggle.
Yeah, or train. It's up to you.
That'd be awesome. I like snuggling though.
But Will knows to be on top. Will knows how to escape the mount. Like, when we wrestle with each other and I'm on top, he'll trap my arm and bump and roll. He taught himself an arm bar just from watching us.
That's awesome.
It's not very good. I'm not saying he's some prodigy. But what I'm saying is, I want him to want to learn. I don't want to force him into it.
Yeah,
because what he doesn't know is he can do whatever he wants. He just has. The Weedman family rule since my father has been, you have to know how to fight. Yeah. You don't have to fight.
Right.
My brother dropped out of the martial arts for a long time.
Well, we train. You have a younger brother, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is he still now?
Is he still doing jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, he's a brown belt. Brown belt. Excuse me. He's a blue belt.
Yeah.
But he's really good.
Yeah, he's tough, man. He's
very
big,
tough.
Strong dude.
But he until he started training again, he hadn't trained since he was like in elementary school, middle school. So Dad never forced it on us, but you do have to know how to defend yourself. That's just the Weedman family trait.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
And so I'm glad that my kids are discovering it. Yesterday my son found some medals in some closet somewhere, and he put them on, and he came out and said, "Hey, Daddy, I won some medals doing jiu-jitsu," and then he ran off. And well, that was kind of cool. That that's
maybe a goal or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Brent, is there anything? I mean, where can people find you if they want to contact you or have any questions for you, anything like that?
I'm back on Facebook. I dropped my Facebook for a while, and then I started to back up. I've got an athlete page and a personal page, and guys can find me there. I'm on Instagram, Brent_Weedman. It's mostly jiu-jitsu and pictures of my kids, which sometimes awesome. Combined. My kids are awesome, so deal with it. And then, and guys can come find me at Core Combat Sports. I'm here. When Soneka's gone, I teach all of the night classes. Whether or not he's here, I teach the Saturday class, the competition training class.
Awesome.
I teach the kickboxing classes. So I'm up here a lot, and I love martial arts, and I'm fond of saying that I would rather somebody train martial arts with somebody else, instead of me, than not train at all. And I know some martial artists that are the other way. I know some instructors that are like, it's me or nobody.
Right.
But I would rather you train with somebody else than not train at all. And so my biggest advice to anybody listening is train. And if you're training right now, maybe find something else to train in too. Cross train. There's a joy in that. So.
Sure. Yeah. Well, bro, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks
so much, Eugene. I had a good time, buddy.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. It means a lot. All right, guys.
Thanks, everybody, for checking out the podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes at the Jiu-Jitsu Therapist Podcast. Also, I have a Facebook page, Jiu-Jitsu Therapist. Follow me on Twitter at Jiu-Jitsu PT. So, guys, I appreciate the time. Anything that you have for me, please send me an email, send me a message. I'd love to answer any questions that you have. Again, I appreciate it. And come back next week for another podcast.